I think of it as like dropping into a wave in a lot of ways. It's like you're sitting out there, the waves are rolling through, like the big set wave comes, it's coming straight towards you. Like, are you going to paddle for it? And are you going to go for it? Like, maybe you'll eat crap at the bottom, but like you don't know unless you commit to it and try. So yeah, that was one of the major chapter changes in my career. I feel like we are changing surfing from the inside out. I feel like by creating a space where women can learn to surf without being like treated like a sex object, where they can fuck up, where their bathing suit can fall off, where they can like be a kook and like we prioritize teaching them etiquette, teaching them the rules. Like it's not just about getting someone a wave and then be like, okay, here's, give me your money. Here, I'll help you catch a wave. Bye. See you never. Like, I feel like we're training an army of like well-informed female surfers. And I think that it will benefit surfing like so much,
Awesome. Well, we always like to start this with where are you and did you surf today? But I can tell by your hair unwetness that you did not surf yet today.
I chose to sleep in. We are in Nicaragua and I surfed yesterday, had a super fun session, but decided to sleep in this morning because I just thought the tide would be too low. But yeah, I heard there was a window though.
Right. We are in my living room in Nicaragua. And this is summer, and anyone that is used to emailing Surf with Amigas in the last, how long has it been now?
It's been just over a year.
Okay, in the last year, if you emailed Surf with Amigas, you talked to Summer. Summer is our new booking manager, which I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
So grateful too for coming into our program. And yeah, we're stoked to have you. You're also a trip leader, so if you've been on a retreat at a few different spots, most recently Peru. Yeah. And Longboard House?
Longboard House in Peru, Latin America mostly. I looked the other day. I've responded to 4,000 emails in the last year.
Wow.
Yes.
That's a lot.
And that's just the ones that require a reply.
Right.
So, yes.
Nice job. Nice job. Waves of love to Summer for all of her email work. Yes.
So if I'm ever short, just know there's a lot of them.
Yeah, lots of emails. And it's hard when you're also trying to be a trip leader or even just a surf instructor running the retreat and then having to get up really early or stay up late.
Stay up late, yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. But I'm stoked. I love it. Like the hybrid between having like online work and then being able to still get in the water with women is a great balance for me. So
awesome.
Shaka.
So maybe we can like work our way like back, because before coming into our life, you were also working at a brand that a lot of Amigas know. You were at Seea.
Yes. Yeah. I was the wholesale accounts manager at Seea. That was how I met Jackie originally, was at Seea. So I managed their like wholesale accounts, and which means that I was the main contact for all the sales reps in different regions. And then a lot of accounts I managed myself, where I would like show them the collection for the following year, and they would send in their pre-orders and stuff. And because you guys stock Seea at the surf boutiques at some locations, Jackie would come into the office every time she came to town, and she was always like so stoked and was obviously scoring all the time. And we would surf Sano sometimes because they're in San Clemente. That's where the Seea office is. But yeah, that was the initial connection and how I learned about Surf with Amigas, I think. And yeah, her froth level was just like so magnetic. I was like, I want to be a part of that.
And I remember in that era, her saying to me, like, oh my God, there's this rad woman that works at Seea named Summer, and she's like the sales manager, and she's super cool. And like over the years, like hearing about you. So it was really cool that we finally got to meet and join you into the team.
What happened for me was my daughter started college in 2020. No, sorry. My daughter started college in 2022. And after about a year, I realized like how little, she was coming home. And I just had this, like, I wanted to get back in the water more. I wanted to be outside more. I wanted to be in the water more and behind a desk less. So, Yeah, as much as I like loved working for Seea and they were amazing and I could surf Santa on my way to work every day, that like feral side of me just wanted to get deeper and like more. So that's how I ended up reaching out.
You were like, I'm kind of feral and I want to be more feral. And who are the most feral chicks I know?
Yes. I want to join this like feral wolf pack.
Epic. All right. Well, let's go back to the beginning real quick. So where did you grow up and how did you get into surfing?
Yeah, I grew up in Encinitas, California, North County, San Diego. And I was like, I don't know, a quarter of a mile from D Street or Moonlight Beach for people that are like familiar with that area. And I grew up in a family with 7 brothers, and most of them were older, and they all surfed. And so me starting surfing was just like, seemed like falling off a log. Like that was just what my whole family was doing. So yeah, I would mess around in the whitewater and like boogie board. And I remember the first time I stood up, it was on a boogie board. We were at San Onofre, because we'd go there for like, just hang out all weekend. And I stood up on my boogie board and I remember the feeling like I was flying, and it lasted for like 3 seconds and then I promptly fell. And I remember like literally going straight to the beach and then like rummaging around, finding one of my brother's older boards and just like marching back out with like, okay, I'm going to do this now.
Do you remember how old you were more or less at that point?
I think I was probably like 10 when that happened. And then through like 11 and 12 was when I was just like messing around and like throwing myself in. And, of course, the first thing I grabbed was like an old shortboard because it was, what year would that have been? That was like 1990. I was rough. And I was like, oh, well, this feels manageable. I can carry it. And I remember the first wave I took off on that board, and it I stood up and it immediately just like flipped over. It was like standing on a popsicle stick is how I remember it. And so then I was like, okay, back to the drawing board. And so I remember I pulled out, ultimately what became my perfect board was this egg. It was probably like a 7-foot egg. It was called like the Astro egg. It was shaped by Gary Hannell, Encinitas local, and she glassed it Moonlight Glassing, and it had this like rad, like tie-dye color fade, like full tie-dye look. And that board ended up being my magic board. It was like wide enough to be stable, but small enough to handle. And I caught my first green wave on that board, which I still can visualize perfectly.
That's so
It
sick.
was so sparkly.
That's epic. I just like can't even comprehend what it would have been like to grow up with so many brothers. Like I come from a family of all girls, and I was the oldest, and like to think about being this one girl amongst like a whole mess of brothers is just crazy. I kind of feel like that. Like I'm like, dude, I mean, I can imagine that there are some struggles that come with that, but also like, wow.
Yeah, it was like, I jokingly call it a wolf pack because when you have that many kids in a family, it's like there's not that much individual like, space. You're crammed together wherever you're going. And my parents, like, they were raising 9 kids total, because it turned out to be 7 boys and 2 girls. Like, that's a lot of work. So we would like, a normal weekend would be that my dad would drive this like motorhome that he built down to the beach, and they would just like kick us all out. And so we just like self-manage, like that era of kids that were like free range. And my brothers, being like a pack of teenage boys, weren't the most nurturing humans in the world. So I just kind of followed them. Like I just tagged along. And to their credit, like once they saw that I was picking it up and that I was like kind of serious about it, they started inviting me. Like actually, they'd be like, we're going to Blacks tomorrow. You want to come? And like I slept in my wetsuit. Like I slept in my wetsuit because we were leaving at 5 a.m. and like I didn't want to miss the boat.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, then the era of teenage years came where, I actually could drop into waves, and they started letting me tag along to like more serious waves. Yeah, and we spent a lot of time in mainland Mexico, and, just everything I learned during that era.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so then very young, you decided to move to Costa Rica.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, so yeah, back to like the motorhome and the traveling as a family, like whenever we had school break, my family, like they weren't going to fly 11 people somewhere, and like rent hotel rooms. So the family camper, that was like where all of our school breaks were spent. And yeah, my parents told me later, like that they would pull up at like a campsite and other people at the site would come over later and they would be like, we saw you pull up and like it was like a clown car. Like we couldn't believe, like we're like, oh look, they're like a family. And there'd be like one kid jumps out and two kids jumps out and three kids jumps out and four kids jumps out. And then they're like, oh my God, like five kids jump out and six kids jump out. And then the last kid gets handed a toddler. And like that was me, or my little brother. And so I already just was so comfortable like spending time in Mexico that Central America felt like the next step. So yeah, I went to Central America when I was like 17 after I graduated high school, and really wanted to like spend time there, and ended up finding some like volunteer projects, which was nice because you could kind of like learn something and have room and board. But then it was close enough to where like I would hitchhike down to the beach from these like farms that I was working on.
So actually farming or
Yeah,
permaculture
well,
stuff?
yeah, like permaculture stuff. The first farm was like this center for restoration ecology that was like, they grew a lot of bamboo and things. And then the second farm was just like an organic farm that had like, hundreds of avocado trees and pineapple and like echinacea and pau de arco, and they did a lot of like essential oils, and yeah, it was fun. Like I liked getting up at 5 a.m. and like working in the gardens.
And my guess is that then you were being exposed to that sort of thing for the first time. Because I feel like these days, like, a lot of young people like go to school and study whatever, but you just straight from high school. Like, did you have any experience like farm working or garden working?
Not really. I knew that I always felt like the most at home outdoors. And so, I think that it was like, I remember like there was this, kind of crusty surfer guy named Robert. Shout out to Robert. Who, yeah, he just surfed and he like ran this farm, and I could just see that it was like a really simple life and felt drawn towards it, and he taught me like the first things that I learned about gardening. But, my family was also like part of a very conservative religion that discouraged going to college. So, I knew growing up like that pathway was super, super discouraged. And it didn't, I know people can like, go against the grain and I'm going to get a scholarship and I'm going to go. But, I just didn't feel like I had the tools or the support. And
was it something you wanted though? Like, it's one thing to be like, I'm interested in this, I want to do it, but I just don't feel like I have the support to do it. And another that's like, I don't know if that's for me.
No, it definitely was something that I wished that I could have done. Like I wanted it. And I think it's part of why I did ultimately leave. Like when all of my friends were going to college, I was like, I am not gonna just stay here and do whatever. Like, I think I was having normal jobs that a teenager would have, like working at a coffee shop and stuff. But the FOMO of not being able to go to college made me go like, well, I'm going to go do something completely different then, because I'm not just going to sit here and watch all my friends do this. And so, yeah, I had to go out and like, I wanted to walk a path that like was at least mine in some way.
And when you got there, and I assume that you were keeping in touch with your friends that were having a college experience in dorm rooms and, parties and all that, like, did you feel like, oh, this is actually true to me? Or, I'm so glad I'm here, like gardening and surfing, or do I wish I was in lecture hall?
I mean, I think because of the era. So I graduated in 2000, and I mean, it was like I kept in touch with friends via email. So it might have been different if social media had existed at the time. You know, I might have actually been able to see what their life was like, or they might have been able to see what my life was like. But the contact we had was through email, where I would go to like the internet cafe in the local town and be like, "Dear Polly, how are you?" You know? So I would say like there wasn't much FOMO for me at that point because I wasn't like faced with it. I couldn't see what their lives were like. I just knew what my life was like. And like, I knew that I loved the smell of the jungle at 5 a.m., you know, when I was going out to like turn on the watering system. Like, I just felt really connected with nature, and that was like something that I really like loved.
Yeah, I wonder if even the FOMO was actually going in the
Reverse.
other direction. Like if your friends were like, yeah, lecture hall is great, but that sounds really cool what you're doing.
I don't even know. And I don't know if they knew what I was doing. You know, like I think that like people just use the term like with the term going tropo. I don't know if, you know, you've heard it probably. I don't know if everyone else knows what that term is, but like going tropo is like the person who like goes to a tropical country and then just never comes back, you know? And so, yeah, I think the general consensus was that I had just gone tropo, you know, and I had. And so I think that later on, you know, I did manage to buy like a small property when I was in my early 20s from one of the farm owners who it was a program that like I locked in on and stayed there for a year and a half. And like we developed, you know, a relationship and, you know, a friendship. And then later they sold me like a quarter of an acre on the corner of the farm. So I think then once I like had bought land and I was in my early 20s when my peers were like graduating, that's when I was like, okay, I'm investing in my future too. It's just in a totally different way.
Yeah, in some ways, like when I think about it now, and as I, you know, my kids are younger than yours, and we'll get to that, but like, and I think about like the skills that are going to be most useful in the future, which is hard to know, but like the idea of like being connected to nature, you know, understanding where food comes from and how to grow things like right this moment feels like a more valuable skill than in an English lit class.
Yeah. And I mean, ideally, like I'd love to have both. Like, you know, I do think that I will go back and like get a degree someday.
But do you really?
I really want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I feel this deep desire to be like really, really, really smart.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think also it's like as a woman, you know, to be perfectly honest, like as we get older and, you know, our bodies are changing, and for people who kind of had like we're lucky enough to have like, you know, good health and like kind of typically good looks or whatever. You know, I get the sense that as I get older, my body becomes less capable or, you know, less aligned with like modern beauty standards, that like I will want to feel like the deep knowing of being an expert at something besides surfing, but also maybe intertwined with surfing. Like I'm deeply interested in history, like world history and humans and like anthropology and things like that. So if I could find a way to blend those things, like it's on my list. My daughter graduates college at the end of, what year is this? What month is this?
Well,
She will graduate next
November.
year.
Okay.
Yeah, she's going to graduate in September of next year. So my goal is that after she graduates, that's going to be a big like, wow, we did it. To maybe think about then like focusing on myself. Maybe like I'll start going to school then.
Epic.
Yeah, I'm going to reward myself in some way.
That's awesome. I love that for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so you're in your early 20s.
Yeah.
You have invested in a piece of property in Costa Rica. Like at that point, are you thinking, this is my life? Like I live in Costa Rica and I'm going to be a farmer, or I'm going to develop my property. Like what was the plan at that point?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
I mean, to be clear, like the property was 20 grand. And I saved for it by like working at a coffee shop, this great little coffee shop that used to be in Solana Beach called Zinc Cafe. And you know, also to just like add a layer, I think that despite the fact that like I didn't have a formal education or whatever, like I had the privilege of growing up in Southern California like, one of the most like wealthy places in the world. And I had the privilege of spending time in Latin America, and I had become fluent in Spanish through just in high school. I took like all the Spanish that I could take. Um, and so, yeah, I had this like the two skills I had were that I spoke Spanish well and that I had been surfing, longer than most people. And so I did have this moment in my 20s, when I sold my car. I had come back from one of the volunteer programs and I was like, I want to go back again. I sold my car and I saved as much as I could and I took 20 grand and I bought a quarter of an acre. So it wasn't like, there wasn't just like money, it was like I had to like scrimp for that and save. And it was during that same time when I had taught surfing. Like I competed in high school. I went to San Diego High School, which is like Rob Machado went there. And, it always had like a pretty competitive surf team. Um, and, and I was teaching surfing during the summers as like a teenage job to kids, for this company based out of Del Mar called Surf Sessions, which was run by like the Mirandon brothers, Eli Mirandon and, Uriah, I think. Yeah. Uriah.
Yeah, I think I competed against them. Well, not against them, but
Same era.
and though I competed at the same time they were competing.
Yeah. So like my summer job had been teaching kids surfing. And I was competing. And so when like fast forward, I was living in Costa Rica, and farming a bit, I started teaching surfing because I was like, yeah, there's a beach town right here and this is what I know how to do. And, teaching like whitewater classes as a one-off to tourists was fine, but it was super repetitive, and you meet someone once and you're never going to talk to them again. And like what ended up happening was like moms were coming to me and they were like, hey, like moms that lived there. And they were like, hey, like, will you teach my kids? But like, could we do classes every week? And I was like, yeah, like I would love to do that. Or a mom of a teenage local Costa Rican came to me and she was like, hey, I heard you're the female instructor in town. Like, I don't want my teenage daughter to like be taught by the boys. Like she was nervous about her daughter getting picked up on or whatever. Like, so it turned into like regular coaching with clients that I had, and we would surf once a week and, or more, but that was super, super gratifying because you could develop a relationship, you could watch them progress over time. And yeah, that was my life in Costa Rica for a long time, was living on the farm.
And didn't you get real involved with the like lifeguards? Don't you have a story of like saving some lives?
I mean, surfers have been like rescuing people in the ocean since forever. And I had the experience of like rescuing people using my surfboard. I took junior guards growing up. I could walk down to Moonlight Beach, and it was kind of one of the few like organized activities that my parents approved of. surfing and junior lifeguards. And then my brothers, like we would be surfing in mainland somewhere and there'd be people who got sucked out in a rip and we would just paddle over. And so I learned from them too earlier. But I had rescued people a lot of times. And the beach where was the closest beach town to where I was living is called Playa Dominical. And it year after year had the highest number of drownings in the whole country. It was a really special kind of just the way the geography is of that spot. There's a huge river mouth. And, so it creates all these like sandbars. It creates a lot of water movement. And during big swell, like on a low tide, you would just have these raging rip currents pulling out. And when the waves came through, like I called it the guillotine because it would just crack so hard, in that, somewhat shallow water. And so people would do kind of also Dominical is the closest beach town to one of the larger kind of blue collar cities in Costa Rica called San Isidro del General Pérez Celedón, or San Isidro is what we call it. But so a lot of people would come down on holiday weekends and they'd be like having a great time with their family, grilling, having some beers, go out for a little dip and get sucked into rip current. And they're trying to come straight back in. And then the set comes and just starts slamming them like relentlessly. It just was like a really like violent, not calculated, but just like a very, very like gnarly situation that would go down. And so ultimately what happened was there's a hotel owner named Mike who tragically lost his brother-in-law out in a drowning out front, and he single-handedly started to fund a lifeguard program. And so a group of the community would just like rally around it. Like we would try to do fundraising. We would set up, like they do still to this day, a 4th of July party every year that's rad, that like raises a lot of money for the program, but like there's no government funding for lifeguards yet, though I think that it's starting to become closer. And so at one point I was on the board, and helping to fundraise and encouraging local businesses and hotels to like set up recurring donations, because these are your customers that are out there, like they need to be safe. So I'm not super involved now, but I do have a reoccurring monthly donation to the Costa Rica lifeguard program.
Nice.
Highly recommend it. If you spend any time in the zone, you should be on the program. But I respect those guys a ton. And obviously all the lifeguards are local surfers, so they were part of the community, and that was something that like really was important to me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I kind of cut you off and got sidetracked as you were starting to talk about you'd gone Tropo.
I had gone Tropo. I was off the radar. At one point, I remember my mom, because I'd be like, oh, I'm staying 3 more months. And I remember my mom saying, like, she's like, honey, like, if you got pregnant, it's okay. You can tell me. Like, you don't have to stay there and hide it. And I was like, Mom, I'm not pregnant. Like, I just have found a life that clicks with me. And, and on a deeper level, like, I was finding my individuation from my family, like, from the, like, very conservative religious part of it. And just finding my own path. And so that was where, like, wrapping back in my 20s, I was like, I think surfing is going to be my whole career. Clearly not as a professional surfer, but I was like, this is the thing that I'm the best at. Like, I think I can just make a career in this. And I had no idea, like, how well it would go, honestly. Like, what the fuck? I think I'm super lucky. But yeah, really, really well.
Here we are. Here we are in Nicaragua.
Yeah.
Okay, so you at some point did get pregnant.
Mm-hmm. So I met this like hot Argentinian guy. He had long hair and tattoos, and his accent was just so, so suave. And yeah, we kind of like dated casually, I think, for about a year. And, he traveled too. He was traveling and I was doing my thing. But then at some point, like, we really kind of locked in. And that was towards the end of that year and a half. But before I bought the property, and I was like, at some point I was like, hey, like, I think I need to go back to California. Like, I've been here for so long. I'm out of money, and I had a plane ticket. I was like, I've changed my plane ticket so many times. I don't think like it's going to last much longer. I need to go. And the plane ticket was actually expired. When I called to like make my final flight home, they're like, it's been over a year. Like, you can't change it again. And so he was like, well, why don't we bus back to California? And so him and I embarked on like a bus journey.
And at what point did he get involved here? He was just like, if you can't fly, I'll come with you.
Well,
Let's go by bus.
Just like, you're in a relationship. And so it was kind of like, I'm like, you can come up if you want, but like, I have to go, you know? And then when when I found out my plane ticket was expired, he was like, well, why don't we do a bus trip? It'll be super fun. He had a 6 months tourist visa. He could go to the States. And let's just like continue our relationship and like, let's get you home and we'll make a trip out of it. So we bussed from Costa Rica all the way up through Central America and, through Mexico, which I had bussed quite a bit already. And we, went to California and continued our relationship there. And then we got married. And then I was 20. So I was 20 when we got married, which I think very much had to do with like a lot of my upbringing and feeling like that was what you did. Like that was your role, even though I was like stretching outside of the box. There was still a lot that was ingrained that was like pulling me back towards these norms. And the next year I got pregnant and had my daughter. So yeah, we were together for like, I think it was like 7, 8 years, basically like all through my 20s. And that was when I had bought the property in Costa Rica, and he was traveling a lot for work. He was going to Florida. And I was like, hey, like we had our daughter, and I was like, well, what if we lived in Costa Rica? Because it's like a shorter flight from Florida anyways. Like it was 3 hours instead of 6, and a lower cost of living. And she was so young. So we did that. And that was an era where I lived there for, like 5 or 6 years straight. And he was traveling for work and whatnot. And ultimately, like our relationship ended. And when it ended, that was 2008. And I remember super clearly because I was like, should I go back to California? And I was just hearing like so much bad stuff about the economy. And I was like, I don't feel like this is a good time to like go try to restart in California. So I hung in there for like 2 years, and my daughter went to like the local kindergarten, which we loved. It was like so great. And I kept coaching. And then in 2010, we decided to move us back, mostly to like plug back in and be closer to family and stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah. And that started like, that's when my career in the surf industry took off. So yeah, that was the start of a new chapter.
Wow. So that property, did you live on that property or?
I did. Yeah. We built a 1 bedroom, 1 bath, house, and had lived in it the whole time and kept it. Still had it even after I moved back. And I just kind of like rented it to, like, there was a lady that wanted to do like a little kindergarten thing or whatever. And it had like a really big outdoor kind of covered patio, like living play area. So it's kind of like, they converted it into like a little school for a while.
Oh, cute.
Yeah. So things like that. But yeah, I moved back and I started working at this really cool surf shop in Lucadia called Surfy, which was owned by a group of friends. One of which was my brother, and one of which was a guy named JP St. Pierre, who is the son of the founders of Moonlight Glassing. And their whole model was like basically just like focusing on carrying like really high quality, nice surfboards. And so, yeah, that was a cool era, because I had access to so many good boards. Like I was able to just, I went from like living in Central America and like approaching tourists and being like, hey, you want to sell me your board before you leave, to just being like in the thick of it and having some of like the best shapers in the world. And so that was a really, really cool era as far as like the development of my knowledge about surfboards in general and access to being able to like try a lot of different boards.
I think it's interesting too. So how old was your daughter when you moved back?
She turned 6 right after we moved back. Yeah.
So yeah, that was like the same kind of time when I moved my kids back to California for a couple of years too. And was it like, as a mom, I could see like there's the balance of like living in Costa Rica, there's like a lot more freedom and bare feet and all of that. And then you go back to Southern California and it's a different culture, but then you also had the benefit question mark of being near your family. Like, what was that transition like as a single mom?
As a single mom at that point, it was cool. Like I ended up renting a place like up the street from my family home. And so my mom swooped in, obviously, as a huge help with my daughter. So, she could like pick her up from school if I couldn't go get her until 5 or whatever. And that was really, really, really helpful. And it also was just helpful in the sense that living in a different country, it's especially if you're living in a remote area, like, I wasn't living in a city. It was like a very remote area. It's really hard to like build a career, maybe nowadays with things being more online, you could kind of do a lot of different things from anywhere. But at that time, surf coaching was like, I really wasn't going to be able to like get beyond that. And so working at Surfy was cool. Like I was doing all the buying for women's gear and, most people that go into a surf shop, like, aren't expecting the girl that works there to like know anything about surfboards. And so it was fun. People would be surprised. And my daughter was going to like Pawlecky Central, which was right across the street there in Lucadia. So it was like it was a good like quality lifestyle of like my triangle of work. Sophia's school, home was a really small triangle.
I think just thinking about how that era was unique, it's interesting because I mean I don't know because I've not looked at rent prices in that part of the world lately, but I imagine that if you as a single mom moving from Costa Rica with probably minimal savings were to go and get a surf shop job and try to find a place to live in Lucadia, like that would be impossible now.
Yes. And, as things go, like I was only able to do it through support of people that I knew. So my sister, bless her heart, like when I first moved back, she was like, move in with me. And we became roommates. And, I was almost 30 at that point. She was like 20. We're 9 years apart. And thank you, Ariel. So I had like those little bits of, I've never had like a lot of family assistance, but like the little bits, really helped me to be able to like springboard and even like, the job at Surfy Surfy, it was like, I had known the family from Moonlight Glassing, like JP was one of my brother's best friends. And so, that was a huge advantage and super helpful. But I remember what was happening when I was working at Surfy Surfy is like, because it was kind of a unique store, like all these industry bigwigs would come in. It was like, the CEO of Billabong and like the CEO of like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I think I could get a better job. I was like, I feel like if I play my cards right, like I could get like a real job. Not that working in a surf shop's not a real job, but like more of an adult job. And so there was this point when I like met enough of these people and I was like, I need to get business cards because it's like a not weird way of exchanging phone number information. Because also as a woman in surfing, like it's such a male dominated industry, or at least it still was and it still is. But it's harder to kind of be like, hey, yeah, like, we should exchange numbers, whatever. So I was like, I'm going to print myself a business card. And it turned out to be like the best $20 that I ever spent.
So what did it say?
It said like Summer Nelson, Surfy Surfy manager, because I was the manager and buyer, women's buyer. And my phone number, my email address. And like on the back,
it wasn't like a woman that knows what she's talking about in surfing.
But I got them printed on like Moo, the website, like called Moo. And on the back, I had like, the back was pictures of either me surfing or like I had some old family pictures because my grandfather was the first person in my family who surfed, and like he surfed at San Onofre in the old days on old wood boards. So like a couple of them, like one of the images I picked was like my grandfather with like a wood board standing at Sano. So like tiny little marketing like plugged in this business card, and it was
so smart.
It was so fucking great. It's like
so smart.
What ended up happening was like a week after I got the business cards, Fernando Aguirre walks into the store. And like, I knew who he was. Like, I knew he had founded Reef and that he was Argentinian and my ex-husband was Argentinian. And so like, I just like locked in and started talking to him in Spanish and like we chatted and I was like, oh, like, what do you do now that you don't own Reef anymore? And he was like, well, I'm the president of the ISA now. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, I just like gave him my card. I was like, well, if you're like hiring, I'm interested, like that's awesome. I gave him my card and he was like, no, you know what? Like, here's my card. He was like, email me your resume. And I went home that day and I was like, I have to make a resume. Like I went to my best friend and I was like, I have to make a resume right now. And like the urgency of it was palpable. Like obviously like there had been a nice click. He saw something in me and I was bilingual, which I think has always been an advantage. And my best friend, Sonia, helped me like make my first resume ever that night. And I sent it to Fernando and then I got a job with the ISA.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you saw that as like, okay, this is a step up. I'm not just a girl in the surf shop now. I'm working for this international organization.
For sure. It was my first big girl job. And, you know, interestingly enough, like one of the things, like to tie Seea back into it, I was one of the buyers or one of the first stores that bought Sea's first line. And so when Fernando was in the shop, he actually saw the Seea suits and bought one for his partner at the time. He was like, this is really cool. And I was like, yeah, these are really cool. It was like the first generation of surf suits that were not neoprene. And, you know, it was like we were having to explain to people what this thing was. And I thought it was really interesting that like he noted that this was like an interesting, cool new product in like the women's surfing world. So that was also when my relationship with Seea had very first started. But when I went to interview with the ISA, he had me interview with like his general manager. And he told me, like, he was like, when Fernando told me that he found someone in a retail store, I was like, dude, like, what are we doing? Like, why are we interviewing someone who works in retail? Like, that's not, but I think that I just interviewed well. They had me write an essay in English and then translate it to Spanish because ChatGPT didn't exist yet. You couldn't just translate things over, in 2 seconds. And
you write an essay on.
The essay was on my inspiration.
Okay.
It was like, what is your inspiration? And I wrote the essay about my grandfather, who was, as I mentioned, like an early surfer at Sano in the 40s. And the fact that his dad had died young and he had worked his way up to becoming like a test flight engineer at Lockheed, and was working with pilots on plane design during the World War II era. So that was what the essay was about. And then I translated to Spanish. And then
they were like,
they read it in Spanish and they were like, we only found one tiny error. And they were like, you're hired.
Yeah.
So, that was cool. And I think it's like, if my application had just been in a pile of applications, like those are one of those things where I feel like they would have seen that I didn't have a college degree and it would have been like, shink, like, nope. But the ability to like connect in person, made the difference there.
Well, and I mean, that's like you did such a good job of marketing yourself first with the business card and then like choosing that inspiration. I mean, you could have said anything. I'm inspired by the sunrise and the whatever,
like Lisa Anderson surfing.
Exactly. But to choose something that like had that tie-in of history and like being self-made and being smart, even without a lot of resources, and then the ability to translate into Spanish.
Yeah.
I mean, like most people would need to go to college to learn how to do all of that.
Yeah.
And you're like, look, I already know how to do it.
Yeah.
Like, school's unnecessary.
Yeah. It was like a total, I think that, I think I've been very fortunate and I think that I have been like also hardworking enough and like gutsy enough to be like, fuck it, I'm just going to do it. Like I'm going to do it. No, I met the president of the ISA. Like I'm going to stay up as late as it takes to get a resume sent to him today because like I'm not sleeping on this opportunity.
Right. Which I think is something that maybe has gone out of style a little bit.
Right?
I don't know. Like this to me, like this is the inspiring story. Like that's it. It's like, recognizing that you did have a lot of privilege, but also had to work really hard. And when the opportunity came, you took it.
Yeah. I think of it as like dropping into a wave in a lot of ways. It's like you're sitting out there, waves are rolling through, like the big set wave comes, it's coming straight towards you. Like, are you going to paddle for it? And are you going to go for it? Like, maybe you'll eat crap at the bottom, but like, you don't know unless you commit to it and try. So that was one of the major chapter changes in my career.
And I imagine that the success of that would have given you a lot of confidence.
Yeah. and also built my resume, because then, and my job for them was, the title was membership manager. And so I was the main point of contact for like the federations of all the different countries in the world that are members of the ISA. The ISA is kind of like the FIFA of surfing. And so, the Mexican Surfing Federation and the Nicaraguan Surfing Federation and the Brazilian Surfing Federation, the French Surfing, like they were all members, and I was the main contact, for general communications and for athlete registration for when they were fielding their teams to the championships. So there was like the shortboard championship, the longboard championship, masters, juniors, all the different events that they did every year. And that was rad because I just got to meet and talk to people, surfers from all over the world. And so then, I would be at the contest site receiving the teams, so much like what I do now. But, making sure they had their paperwork in order and, giving them their swag bags and being like, okay, here's the contest schedule. Here's at the end of the event every night, I had to write a write-up of what the conditions were like,
Wow.
who won, who lost. And then I would take that write-up and I would translate it to Spanish. And then I would send it to, Fernando and get him to approve it. And then I would send it to all the team managers. So it was like a lot of communication. And like super rewarding to be able to meet all those surfers. Actually, one of our other coaches, Britt from New Zealand, I met her in Ecuador because she was on the Ecuador youth team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
cute.
That was funny when I realized that I knew her.
You're like, wait a minute.
I was like,
seen you before.
You're holding the flag.
That's so cute. Epic.
Yeah.
Okay, so we went from ISA to
Surfy to ISA.
to Seea.
And so then Seea, the transition to Seea was ultimately with the ISA, like it was a ton of traveling to all the events. And my daughter by this point, like was 8, 9, 10 years old. Like that's her. And so my mom was having to help a ton and, leaving for 2 weeks at a time to, let's say 7 events a year, like really adds up. That was a lot of time. And eventually, and I had like a friendship with the owners of Seea. And eventually, I can't remember what it was. I think I just emailed them and I was like, hey, like, same with Jackie, I was like, I love my work at the ISA, but it's too much travel. And, I feel bad, like having to have my mom help with my daughter and stuff. And they offered me a job as their like sales manager, which being that point of contact for all these different like federations kind of translated into being the contact for buyers from a bunch of different stores, so it like in a weird way, there was like a segue that felt pretty comfortable
into being the point of contact for thousands of amigas.
I told you I was in honors English in high school.
Very impressive. Very impressive.
Really pulling through here.
I know. Well, sometimes I look at the emails that you send, compare them to the emails that I sent. We had an amiga one time who was, I think, a teacher, and she used to chastise me in person because I don't like to use punctuation in my emails. So you're much better for the job.
You write the way you talk.
That's right.
Which I totally respect, and I get it. And I'm definitely a little bit more formal.
And I appreciate that. It's good.
It just
shows the professionalism that we aspire to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess I find the interesting question to be, and now what? Because, it seems like from what I've heard, there was this like moving to Central America to become an individual and to see what you're capable of, and also because the college wasn't an option, so get away from that. And then having a child and needing to do what was right for her, to moving back to the US, to California, and like pursuing your big girl jobs. And now that your daughter is about to graduate college and you are now moving back in Costa Rica, like what do you see for yourself going forward?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think that the work that I do with Surf with Amigas is like super meaningful to me. It's super meaningful to me in a number of ways. I think that I think of it in a deeper way than probably most people would assume. And going back to the surf industry, like when I was in high school, a friend of mine, her dad worked for Channel Islands, and we got passes to go to like the ASR show in San Diego. And it was like 1994. And I was so stoked. Like, I was like, this is the Mecca. Like, this is where all the best surf stuff is. This is where surf culture comes together. And I remember so like clearly that trade show. And one of the things I remember so clearly was the Black Fly booth.
Ooh, yeah.
The Black Fly booth had women walking on a runway wearing thongs, sucking on blow pops. And I actually like cried when I left that trade show. Like, because I had grown up in this environment with my brothers, you know, I was around surfing guys, but they weren't sexualizing me. You know what I mean? And like, so I really was a little bit blissfully unaware of like how sexualized women were in the surfing industry. And, you know, like somehow I guess I thought I was going to go to the trade show and I was just going to see like people like you, like all the women shredders. And I wasn't seeing the women shredders. Like, I was only seeing women represented as like sexy models, which is like, that's fine. If you want to be a sexy model, like no judgment there. But like, I was like, where are the women surfers? Like, I thought this was a surf trade show. And that was like super naive of me at the time. I like just kind of didn't know. I'm sure you've experienced that firsthand in a very...
Yeah, that was a really bad era.
It was a particularly bad era. And so now the work that I do, to me, it feels very like, I feel like we are changing surfing from the inside out. I feel like by creating a space where women can learn to surf without being like treated like a sex object, where they can fuck up, where their bathing suit can fall off, where they can like be a kook, and like we prioritize teaching them etiquette, teaching them the rules. Like, it's not just about getting someone a wave and then be like, okay, here's, you know, give me your money. Here, I'll help you catch a wave. Bye. See you never. Like, I feel like we're training an army of like well-informed female surfers. And I think that it will benefit surfing like so much, you know? So I see it as like, just like almost just like training these women and sending them out into the world, training them and sending them out into the world. Like, and so, yeah, I see it as this kind of like deeply, almost rebellious act of, instead of asking the industry to change, changing it from the inside by infiltrating it.
Yes. That was, I like get goosebumps hearing you say that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, you're right. That is what we're doing. Yes.
Started this. So I, you know, respect and appreciate how brave you've had to be, you know, because you take shit all the time from people and you have a thicker skin than I am. So I don't have that thick skin, but I think that that's where like the team comes in, because, you know, I may not have the thick skin. You have to end up taking a lot of shit from the public in different ways of being like questioning, you know, if it's even the right thing to do to teach people to surf because lineups are already so crowded or whatever. The many, many things that people kind of decide to like get in little spats over. And I don't have a thick enough skin to do that part of it, but I do have the knowledge to teach women and to make them feel safe and to like help them. And I just feel like so stoked to be able to use that skill in this company. It's like, it's great. So I think it's interesting because people will be like, oh, you're a surf instructor. And I'm like, I guess like, I don't really see myself that way. Like, you know, I have a good friend who is like the head coach at for the men's baseball, like at a college in California. And we talk about coaching all the time, you know? And so I don't see myself as a surf instructor. I see myself as a coach. And I think there is a difference there, you know? To me, a surf instructor is like the dude who, you know, pushes girls into whitewater in, you know, whatever tourist town. But we're coaching people and like helping them improve, helping them understand the ocean better, helping them understand how waves work, and like making them into like conscientious surfers. And I think there's a difference there.
You know, that's interesting to hear you say that, because I know that it has been something that we've dealt with in finding instructors. And we've talked a lot about, like, there are women on our team who are a little bit older and who have lived other lives, like had other jobs, done other things, and that they really appreciate this job because of the lifestyle that it allows them to live. And also that part that you're talking about right now, that like it's about kind of the whole person.
Yeah.
And then we have women on our team who are younger, who are maybe just out of college and they want to like spend a few years before they go back and get their master's or before they go get their big girl job. And they have like a totally different perspective. And like, I hear from them a lot, this like, I don't want to just be a surf instructor. Like, I need to use my brain, and like, I want to play them what you just said, because I agree with your perspective. And that the ones that, like, we just did a retreat last week in Nicaragua, and it was the first time, we call it like the geriatric team, because it was Summer and I and Megan. I called it that. I called it that to Jackie. I'm like, dude, we've got the geriatric surf instructors right now because we are all over 40.
You've got the premenopausal surfing.
Never did I ever imagine in starting Surf with Amigas that we would have a group of 15 women led by 4 female instructors, all over 40, surfing the boom. Like, that was crazy.
Yes.
When I realized, like, oh my God, look at where we are and what we're doing.
Yeah. And I think that, like, for me, getting into the deeper aspects, like, of the things that we teach is where I like nerd out super hard. And any amiga who's ever like watched me teach the surf forecasting class, like, knows like how like wildly into it I get. And, you know, and maybe it's also because I love teaching, you know, so maybe I have a bit of a teacher's heart. But yeah, I think it's not just teaching people to surf, but it's like helping them connect with nature too. And a certain amount of maturity is super valuable. And I will say, like, one of the other things that is deeply meaningful to me is to teach women that it's not just about how their body looks. It's about like feeling joy and moving it and having fun with it. Because so much of our lives we're being pushed towards, you know, consuming things and looking a specific way. And, you know, the capitalism machine it wants all of our waking moments to be spent either, you know, participating in capitalism in some way, either buying something or earning money or whatever. And obviously I earn money doing this job, but like, to take people and get them away from screens, away from their phones, immersed in the ocean and using their bodies in a way that is nothing but joyful, to me is also an act of rebellion. And like you said, having like a group of women surf, you know, like a super hollow, amazing beach break that like most of them would not, some of them would for sure. And not to take anything away, like they're able to, but it can be very intimidating. And so to be able to like remove some of those barriers, like I think that what we are already seeing and what we're going to see more and more of is, you know, women surpassing levels of surfing, big wave surfing, and all kinds of things that anyone thought they could do. And it's not because they couldn't do it. It's because like they didn't have a way to learn how and get practice in doing it. I remember this one amiga who was like, my mom like wouldn't let me go out from under the umbrella, you know, when we were at the beach, because she was like, no, sweetie, like you're going to get burned. And so it's like, yeah. And you know, I know this is a part of your story too, is like that, like, no, you're supposed to wear a dress, or like, no, you can't go out. You might get hurt. You might get sunburned. Like you might get hurt, you know, is a lot of things that like well-meaning protective parents like told their daughters, and, you know, they meant to help them and protect them, but also like instilled fear in them that made them then not pursue some like really cool stuff they wanted to do.
And that stops now.
And we're ending that.
And we're ending that. Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We did that.